This is the Three Left-Handed Podcast, and I'm one of your hosts, Fong Nguyen.
I'm Diana Hall.
And I'm Susie Nash. And we're really excited because we have a wonderful guest today. Amelia Carter is from Philadelphia and is the founder of Penn Community for Justice. She is also a self-taught filmmaker who previously directed and produced the documentary Until and Unless, Decriminalizing Queer India. We're going to take a short look at a clip from that. And also the short animated film Testimony, 52nd Street and the Invisible Violence of UPenn. Amelia is also the assistant director of the South Asia Center at the University of Pennsylvania, and she has 10 years of community activism and queer activism and art organizing experience in Philadelphia, and she throws one hell of a party. So hopefully we'll have one here today.
And what happened to my queer lesbian introduction? You just cut that?
I put queer activism.
Okay, well, I'm also a lesbian.
Very good.
Let it be known.
And single.
Yes, and looking.
Welcome, Amelia.
Hi.
So
Thanks
Diana,
for
you had a
having
question
me.
for her?
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here today
Thanks.
as our first guest at the WOW studio. Are you from the area?
Yes, I am from Philadelphia. I moved here when I was 15, and before that I lived just outside of Philly in a few different towns. And my father lived down the street from here in Kensington at one point, Fairmount and Germantown, and most parts of Philly I feel like we've lived in at one point or another. So
That's great, yeah.
I was going to say she gets around, but that would be rude this early in the conversation.
I do, though. I really do. I like a lot of variety, and maybe it's my Aquarian nature. I like to move around a lot. I mean, most of it wasn't like totally intentional, all of the moving, but you know, when that's the necessity, you start to actually like find a bit of magic in that and enjoy the new atmosphere, the new community, new streets to discover, walk down. So yeah.
And you've stayed too. So.
Yes, I feel very dedicated to Philadelphia. It's like it's home, it's my love, and I am really passionate about community organizing. And, just at a young age, I feel like I always really believed in Philly. I always saw it as like an underdog city. And especially as a teenager, people would always rag on Philly, like Philly was the thing holding them back from having everything they wanted in life. And I always felt like it was our job as Philadelphians to make it what we wanted it to be and what we needed it to be. So I've always enjoyed the process of figuring out what does that mean and how do we put the puzzle pieces together to make it prosperous for us.
Bravo.
Mm.
Well, can I ask you, so what keeps you busy most days? What's your day like?
Well, there's like kind of pre-pandemic life and post and during and not quite post yet. So I find that I really get really into projects. I mean, I also do have a full-time job, but I think pre-pandemic I was really invested in that job and was committed to kind of expanding the programs of the South Asia Center at Penn and helped to develop the internship program. And through those types of initiatives, also the teaching artist residency, I was able to do a lot of creative activities. And my kind of passion was always to use art as a vehicle for teaching about South Asia. So I was able to bring really interesting artists from India to do that, to carry that out, as well as bringing the activists that I had worked with over the years. These were trans women activists with Calcutta for Equality and Justice. Calcutta Anandam for Equality and Justice, also known as CAGE. And so that involved bringing them to Philadelphia to use the film that we made that you just mentioned in the description, Until and Unless, as a teaching tool. And the cool thing about that was that we felt it was important to allow the community to be the authority in their own lives. I think in academic spaces, all too often, PhD holders, faculty, or students are put in that authority position. And we felt it was important to say, no, the people of this community, number one, can create the films themselves. And we did community-driven approach to filmmaking with that project. And then we brought them to Philadelphia and toured the film around the United States to different campuses and community centers and so on, so that they could speak in their own words and teach students what they otherwise would have had to go to a faculty person or researcher to get.
And you're not really a filmmaker by through your education, because you have a different educational background.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you figure it out, how to put the team together and how to put your vision together?
Yeah, it was very organic. I think none of us went into the relationship thinking that we would make a film. We first were going to the community, and it was something that was built over several years. So that first year, it was just kind of getting to know each other. And then the second year was like, okay, what do we want to make together? How do we see our partnership and our relationship developing? And they really wanted to do an awareness campaign of some kind about Penal Code 377, which is the anti-sodomy law, which is a colonial relic, which basically criminalizes gay men and trans people. And that's like an oversimplification of terms, because queerness in India has different language around it and different identities around it, but just for the sake of this audience. And at the time, the law was still very much alive and well. So the following year, we developed this internship program at the South Asia Center with many different placements all around South Asia. But for this one, we made it about this film project. And so we found videographers who were willing to support this cause, who were local. We found Penn students who were willing to support this effort and wanted to learn how to make an advocacy film like this. And pretty much just through the kindness of, people who wanted to uplift these stories and be involved in this type of work, we were able to kind of piecemeal it together. And then after creating it, I was like, oh crap, now we have to do editing? What is that even about? And then thankfully found an old friend from like high school days who was living in Brewerytown, and he ended up going to school over this period of time, becoming this amazing editor, and we edited the film together, which was a very cool process. Like, I never realized how creative and fun the editing process can actually be, because that's where the real storytelling happens, it turns out. So then after that, we realized, okay, now there's this distribution question. It's like with a film, it never ends, the work never ends.
Can we jump in, just have you talk a little bit about the film, since we're talking about how it was made, but sort of explain what the film was about?
Yes. So,
and who, I know you were talking about we a lot and they, so explain who those folks are.
Yes. So essentially the core group of Anandam, so Anandam is what they're called for short, or Cage. I might switch back and forth.
We were having an argument earlier of who was going to have to pronounce Anandam, so we're glad you did it.
Yes, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. So essentially, the main core group there are Shintu, Neetu, and Dr. Shoma, who's like a translator and advisor for them. She has a social work and psychology background. And then those are the ones that I brought to Philadelphia. And then there's another core group that's much more expansive than that, actually, in Calcutta. So they're based out of Calcutta, out of Sonagachi primarily, which is the red light district in Calcutta. And then, but this group in particular often works outside of Calcutta in the rural area. That's where a lot of their members are. And that's basically who makes up the organization. There's hundreds of folks who are involved in that group. And like, for instance, during COVID, they have tried to do fundraising to distribute livelihood and survival packages to community members, because a lot of folks either, are involved in sex work and can't do that because of the risk involved with COVID. So there's been like a real economic crisis, or they are migrant workers, or doing other kinds of jobs that involve in-person contact, which are no longer viable. So basically, it's like, as if we are united and we're all kind of banding together, we can survive anything. That's not an official slogan, but that's the sentiment. So it's almost like collectivist in its mission, and that comes from a whole other history that I won't get into here. But
and the we is basically the queer, for lack of better term. I know it's more broad than that, but community in that area in India.
Right. So the primary identities are trans women, Koti, which is a very place-specific identity. I think unique not only to India, but also like northern India in particular. There might be other identities in southern India and other parts, but there's so much diversity. It's like we can't get into it all, but at least here. And that, when this came up in previous conversations when we were touring the film, like what is Koti? They, to simplify it and put it in terms we could understand, was almost like a genderqueer, but then they also described it as feeling internally as a trans woman, but not reflecting that outwardly. So there are those folks, and then there are gay men, and that's the primary. And then there's like Hydras, which is in the spectrum of trans women. So those are the primary identities of the folks who are there. And so what the film is about Penal Code 377, as I mentioned. They wanted to create this awareness film. And we followed the stories of Neetu, who is a sex worker who lives near Sonagachi and has very long roots in the area as a sex worker activist. And is very well loved and respected as kind of like the older person of the group. And so we follow her story. We follow Shintu, who lives in more of the rural kind of area in a kind of small by Calcutta standards town outside of Calcutta, in that red light district there. And someone named Bhaskar or Lovely, who actually worked at a office at the time and wanted his identity to be concealed. Later, Bhaskar came out as Lovely as a trans woman. And so there's a lot of dual identities happening. So when the person is presenting as male, they go by male pronouns. And when they present as a woman, they go by, female pronouns. And then we also follow one of the youngest members of Anandam, and who is also Koti identified. So, yeah, the film kind of looks at how that law impacted their lives.
And this is the first film you produced and directed.
Yes.
And so what was it like being your first film, traveling to Calcutta? Were there a lot of challenges you faced? It seems like a daunting task to be starting this new process of being a filmmaker, and then also being immersed into a totally different culture and meeting all new people and communities.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge, would be an understatement. It was really hard. Thankfully, I had been traveling to India at that point for the last 10 or more years. And working with this community for like 3-4 years before this. So we had a familiarity and a closeness already, but none of us had any idea how difficult this would be. The really important thing for us was to not have, be really conscious and aware of these dynamics that tend to exist with Western people. It doesn't matter your own racial or sexual identity, people of more privilege coming into less privileged backgrounds or communities and creating film projects. We really wanted to disrupt the normal kind of tendencies within that relationship. And so that's why it was important for us to have them as co-directors. And really none of us knew what we were doing. So we were all kind of at the same level. And that really made for a lot of beautiful, powerful moments in the film. There's I don't want to give too much away, I guess, but there's many moments that they crafted themselves that came off really strong.
We have a clip.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
you guys want to see the trailer?
Mm-hmm.
কিন্তু মানে এমন এমন সমাজের থেকে আমাদের বাধাবিঘ্ন আছে, হ্যাঁ, সেটা বলার মতন নয়। কেন আমরা কি এই সমাজের থেকে কি আলাদা? না আমরা এই সমাজের কেউ নই? না আমরা অন্য কোনো একটা গ্রহ থেকে আমরা এসেছি? কেন আমাদেরকে সেই অধিকারটা দেওয়া হবে না? কেন আমাদেরকে সেই স্বাধীনতাটা দেওয়া হবে না?
তার কারণ হচ্ছে কি, একটা নর্মাল ছেলে, একটা নর্মাল মেয়ে, তারা স্বাধীনভাবে বাঁচতে পারে, স্বাধীনভাবে সব কিছু করতে পারে, তাদের জন্য কোনো মানে বাধা নিষিদ্ধ নেই। কিন্তু আমরাও তো একটা মানুষ, তো আমাদেরও তো কোনো আশা আকাঙ্ক্ষা থাকতে পারে।
It is not about prosecution, it is about persecution. It is not about how many people have died. It is about in front of how many people the gun is being held. That itself is a human right violation.
How long are we going to shout? I always inspire my friends, my kids, my daughters, shout. Because until and unless you shout, you won't get the chance.
So essentially, folks in the beginning were talking about the types of discrimination they were facing, and just that it's kind of an onslaught of, you know, discrimination from society, from families, from, you know, systems. And then the folks who were speaking later are like well-known, one's a well-known trans activist, and the other one is a well-known lawyer and advocate. And he was talking about what needed to be done to kind of overcome this law, and why it's important to do that, how unconstitutional it is that it even exists. So during the editing process, it actually was repealed. So that kind of changed. We had all this footage about it still being there. And then we realized that, you know, just as in the United States or any other place, just because a law is repealed doesn't mean that everything is magically fixed. It's decades and decades and decades of harm that needs to be repaired, and of a certain way of thinking. And, you know, it's not to say it was an overwhelming, yeah, everyone agrees on this now. You know, usually it's like about half of the people still hold on to discriminative beliefs. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to say that, you know, all of this pain doesn't disappear overnight. We still have to carry that every day, and there's still constant attacks against the community, as we face here.
I really liked the subjects that you picked for this documentary. And for those who don't know, the term subject meaning the people that she chose to highlight. You know, because I wanted to say, like, they had some of the most beautiful souls I've ever met. Because when I went to the screening that you had here in Philadelphia, and they were telling their stories, I was just taken aback by their energy. And I was wondering how did you pick those? How did you pick them? And were there other people that you interviewed, or were these were it, and you just knew?
Thank you for saying that. That's really sweet. And I think that really like amplifies the importance of bringing people, the actual people that are being quote unquote like subjects in, whether it's something, an area of study, or whether it's a piece of art or something like that you're creating, or a documentary, bringing them to speak for themselves, because the impact is so much more valuable than just having someone who, you know, is a surrogate, you know, to them. If we can find money to pay, you know, PhDs and faculty people to fly all over the world to talk about subjects, with air quotes included, then we can definitely pay to fly the folks over themselves to speak for themselves. But we really chose each other. You know, it was because we met a few years prior. We actually, the person who, so in the film, Shintu talks about a friend of hers who committed suicide. And, it, you know, Shintu kind of points to the pressures of, living in a discriminative world, which resulted in that suicide. And it took us a while to realize that the person that she was talking about was actually the person who first linked us all together. I had brought students to the sex worker collective called DMSC or Durbar for a course. And after we kind of met them in passing, the kind of LGBT contingent of that sex worker collective, and then this person came into the room that I was just kind of waiting for the students to get their stuff together so we could leave, and said to me, if you want to work with us, we want to work with you, and we want to build this connection. And I was like, and this is all like through a big language barrier, and there was no translator there, but this was the message that came across. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know how I can be involved, but if you want to work with me, I want to work with you. Like, let's do this. So then the next year, when I came back, that person wasn't around. But I just assumed that they were traveling. A lot of people like travel in and out for different types of work. And yeah, it wasn't until we did this interview that I made the connections, like, oh, wow, this is that person who initially connected us. So the rest of the folks are basically the leaders of the community. And so because they're the lead folks, they tend to have much more experience speaking in front of cameras or audiences and advocating for themselves, advocating for the community. So they were the natural leaders to do this. There really wasn't anyone else that I could have imagined working with, especially so intimately, because we had such a long history of working together at this point.
Well, one thing that I know it's a very heavy subject matter that you were dealing with. But of course, whenever you're doing any kind of filming, there's something that goes wrong or something that's a little wacky or funny. So what's the craziest thing that happened to you during the course of the filming?
Well, I mean, it was actually like more heaviness. It wasn't so like lighthearted. In the middle of filming, my father actually passed away right just down the street from here, and where we're recording this right now. And that was really difficult. And but we also felt that it was really important that we finish this work. And like, it was so difficult just to get all of this stuff together, and like really just grabbing nickels and dimes wherever we could find them to cobble together the money to get this done at like the bare minimum level. So I personally felt like I couldn't stop working on this, and that it's not like what my dad would have wanted or anything like that as well. And so I continued the last few days of filming, and then I left, and immediately the next day I arrived, went to the funeral. So it was a lot of heaviness. It was a lot of difficulty, but I don't regret that decision. And I think that it was something that like my family was very supportive of and was happy that I followed through with that commitment.
Oh, that was much later. Thank you.
Right.
Sorry. So you can get a lot of messages from this film. What is the most important message that you would want people to take from it?
I think, I don't know, I'd have to rewatch it really, because I feel like there were a lot of things that came up that I wasn't expecting, that like I didn't even know that was the story we were telling until after the editing process was finished. And I think like maybe that's a cliche thing that every filmmaker says, but it's true. And I think that since it's been like a couple years after the fact at this point, if I rewatched it, I'd have a better answer to that. Were you guys able to watch it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what did you feel the message was?
I think that it's great that the Section 377 has been repealed, but the message I got was that the work, this is just the tip of the iceberg, I think is a quote, that the work is just beginning. It's not like this is going to fix everything. There's so much to be done within the society, and it's a systemic issue that will take constant work for the, like you said, like for the next few decades.
Yeah.
What I got from it was it's just this realization of how much we live in a bubble sometimes in America, and we don't know how people are exactly living in other countries unless we actually go there ourselves or someone gives us a glimpse of it or a slice of it. And bringing these stories and promoting it is the best that we could do because we just don't know. And what you don't know, you can't solve. And it was really touching because I just, not that I could ever empathize what they go through, but I can put myself in those shoes of some of the suffering and that they were feeling, but not to, obviously I would never say to the extent that they have felt, but to feel outcasted, ostracized for something that you have really no control over as far as like identity wise. So.
Yeah, well, I think we were privileged enough to be a co-sponsor of the screening that you did at the International House.
Yes, the Women's Film Festival was.
Yep. And so as the Women's Film Festival, and all three of us come out of that festival, and of course we work hand in hand with the festival. Just in general, I think it's wonderful when we see films like this and present films like this, which for me, I know it just makes me realize, like, please stop complaining about anything going on in your life because you have it so lucky. And, not just this film, but a lot of the films that we present, whether it's about water shortage or, what people living under strife and warfare and all sorts of things. I think for me, it makes me sort of stop and do a little check on myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now hearing your feedback, it kind of like, I'm just going to go back to the memory of how it felt to show the film and see how it impacted students, not only to watch the film, but then to be able to speak to people directly, and then how the community members interacted with students. And for the first several screenings, people were, the Shintu, Nitu, the folks who were in the film were, crying a lot of times as they were speaking to the students because, and then we would talk to them afterwards and be like, are you okay? Were you upset about something? And they were saying, like, I'm just so happy. And it's such a healing experience for me that I can come here and be heard and that my message can be received not only so empathetically and so respectfully, but like with so much love and so much camaraderie. And for me, like the power of the film and doing things like this that are like, when you have the opportunity to be so holistic, like we were able to be with this film in terms of like that whole aspect of how we showed the film and everything, it just really brings home like that radical solidarity piece that, we are all fighting these systems of oppression, and the more we lift each other's stories up and the more we lift each other up as real people, real humans, the more we can heal ourselves and each other, and the more we can create powerful change and the real kind of change we want to see.
Well, speaking of change, we also have another film of yours, so maybe we should change up and talk about that a little bit.
I do have one last question about Until and Unless. Have you kept in touch with the main group, the community that you filmed?
Yes.
And how are they doing since the law has been repealed?
Yeah, so I am still in touch, very regular touch with them, and mostly through WhatsApp. And we did actually a couple of different programs earlier in the year where it was like a Zoom kind of program where we screened the film and, did all of that. And that was really great. But yeah, they're doing as well as can be expected. I really respect and appreciate the work that they're up to in terms of trying to get this survival packages out to folks so that people in the community aren't starving during the economic collapse that India is going through under the COVID-19 crisis, which has hugely skyrocketed out of control due to, poor political choices. This absolutely could have been avoided. And
here too.
Right, and here as well. And as the world over, the poorest folks, the most vulnerable folks are the ones who are worse impacted. And they choose to go out there like every day and whenever they are able to get even the smallest amount of funds and distribute that to the community. And that is such radical, powerful work. And I just really respect and appreciate them for doing that work. And they have a fundraiser going on right now that maybe we can include in the show notes if you want to help with that. All of the money goes to feeding folks in the trans and queer community, sex work community, and so on.
That'd be great.
Yeah, do you want to say the web address?
I don't have it on me right now, but you can, I don't have any of that
put it in
information.
the description.
Yes, that'd be great.
So let's talk a little bit about your latest film, your animated film, which is starring
Me.
Amelia Carter. Woo woo.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of put myself out there in a big way, and that's very nerve-wracking and scary to do. But, I felt it was important.
About.
So it is about the police attack that happened on May 31st on 52nd Street, which happened after the May 30th uprising. That whole weekend was an uprising across the United States where people were marching and coming out in droves, protesting the murder of George Floyd and police impunity in general, and we're making the demand to end police impunity, to defund police departments, and to reinvest in Black and brown communities. And once the uprising kind of came to Philadelphia, and, on May 31st, there was a lot of rioting and looting that devolved from the, huge historic peaceful protests that we had earlier in the day. I personally feel because the rioting and looting happened in Center City, in one of the wealthiest districts in Philadelphia, they didn't think it was a good idea to tear gas that community. But then the next day, they came to 52nd Street and tear gassed us for several hours. I witnessed an elderly woman being shot in the face with a rubber bullet. I witnessed, a lot of people being assaulted by police, and myself was tear gassed several times. And my home was filled with tear gas. So there was no escaping the situation. We were in it, whether we wanted to be there or not. And that was a really radicalizing moment for me. It was one that really jump-started a whole year of really intense activism around, advocating to demilitarize Philadelphia's police force, to defund Philadelphia's police force, to find and advocate for police-free alternatives to public safety, and really move away from this policing model. The word abolition kind of scares a lot of people, and for me too. It's like, I don't like labels, but, I'm just going to put that out there.
And yet you gave me such a hard time about making sure I said lesbian.
Right. But then before that, I was like, not saying it. So, these things happen.
So can we show a clip of it right now?
Yeah. My name is Amelia Carter. I have worked at Penn for 8 years and live on 52nd Street. I was there on May 31st when the police swarmed my community. But when I heard from my neighbors that Penn and Drexel University police were present on 52nd Street that day, a wave of anger, sadness, and outrage washed over me. How could this be? Why would campus police do this? Cobbs Creek is a residential neighborhood far outside of campus, and university police are only meant to serve students, right?
So here's our first question.
So, can you tell us about the Penn Community for Justice and how it came to be? Did this come before or after what happened on 52nd Street?
So it was created after what happened on 52nd Street. Basically, I was really pissed about what went down, and also just it made me realize, like, I had always been a supporter of Black Lives Matter protests, went to protests, but never was in those organizing spaces. And a lot of the organizing work that I had done was based on like, economic development work, when I did work with Germantown United CDC, or, then with this topic, like working with this community in India and different things like that. It was never kind of looking at systemic racism in the United States in terms of my hands-on organizing work. And for me, that really shifted that day. And that moment, that incident kind of, and all of the incidents that followed after that created a real sense of urgency for me, that this is no longer something that is acceptable just to show up for the protests. Like, we all need to have our hands on deck right now. We all need to be showing up as hard as possible. But then there was a kind of a component for me that was like, this is probably like a trauma response, that I'm like throwing myself so hard into this work right now in an imbalanced way. Like there was, I think for many of us, we were like eating and breathing this organizing work, like going to a protest every day, organizing a protest every day, speaking giving testimony at a public hearing, or this, that, and the other, writing an op-ed. There was just never any kind of end. But I was really grateful for that, because I think that, creating that community of Penn Community for Justice, it was basically finding other people within Penn's worlds, because I felt like it was very much like a not a very active community, not a very politicized community. And that's as someone who's worked there for 8 years, especially the staff had not been really engaged in political subjects. And I felt that was something that was really missing. So I wanted to organize staff. I wanted to connect staff with students and kind of collectivize our power so that we could create change. Because Penn in particular is one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, nonprofit institution in Philadelphia. And they don't pay taxes. They have the largest private police force. They were present on 52nd Street that day, assisting the PPD in their crackdown, which has now been labeled as a human rights violation. So if the PPD can be, and PPD being the Philadelphia Police Department, can be held accountable in all of these different ways, why aren't we trying to hold the private police forces accountable? So that was kind of that aspect. But then there's also this like divest from police but fund our communities component. And because Penn is a tax-exempt nonprofit, they don't pay property taxes. This is despite the fact making millions and millions of dollars every year on incredibly overpriced student tuition, making tons of profit off of their real estate holdings throughout West Philadelphia, which used to be a predominantly Black neighborhood, and so on. So that, for decades, that's been happening and has drained the public coffers of West Philadelphia and our resources, community resources. So the campaign for PILOT, which is payments in lieu of taxes, was to address that issue and to try to get them to pay what they would be paying in taxes, or at least a portion of that, to an education equity fund to benefit our public schools.
I was shocked to see how militarized the Penn police were, and the fact that they were allowed to go off campus to assist in quotes,
right,
the Philadelphia Police Department, and to wreak havoc on the neighborhoods that are surrounding Penn.
Right, exactly. So I was really shocked by that as well, and it really made me wake up to this reality that a lot of campus security has evolved into full-blown police departments and connected in with police departments, but in this way that enables them to have all of the autonomy, but also like all of the resources and militarization. And that was really a wake-up call for me, that's been going on, and that their budget is $27 million, wow, which they get from student tuition, from my understanding. And that really speaks volumes to, I don't know, how much we don't know, and hopefully like how students can maybe better utilize their power as the people who pay for that, to have more of a voice in how the police conduct themselves, the Penn police or the private police forces.
One of my comments is this is going to sound ridiculous, and I'm trying not to make it so lighthearted, but, I accidentally tried to test, was it pepper spray with my mom. My mom wanted me to test it after the whole slew of Asian attacks that were happening because of COVID. And she wanted me to test it. And I was like, all right, we'll test it outside. And she was standing right next to me. And I sprayed it really far down.
Yeah.
And I got a speck of it in my throat and in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I was crying and coughing for a good 20, 30 minutes. And that was
Right.
just with pepper spray.
Right.
And my mom was crying and coughing
Yeah.
for 20 minutes. I mean, we laughed our asses off about it. But that's not really funny in your
Yeah.
case because tear gas.
Yeah,
Especially
and pepper spray was being sprayed in huge amounts. There's that famous picture now of this woman holding a shopping bag being sprayed. It's a huge. It's almost like a I don't know, like
fire
a
hose?
fire hose amount of pepper spray directly in her face, like 3 inches from her face, and she's trying to run away. Like it's
really painful.
Yeah.
And I only had a speck of it. And I can only imagine what that felt like for you and for all the other people who had a whole bunch of it in the air because I literally sprayed it towards the ground as as far away from my face as possible. And still it came back up.
Right.
And I just wanted to say that if there was anyone of our audience that didn't know the impact or how painful pepper spray or tear gas can
Yeah.
be.
And it entered
Wonderful.
into your home as well.
Right. And during the public testimony that happened in October, or rather the public hearing where people gave their testimony, there was a person who was a physician who ran. I mean, the beautiful thing about what happened is that you really got to see neighbors lifting up neighbors and like helping people. Like people came out of the woodworks with PPE, with milk, with buckets to pick up and gloves to pick up the canisters that were still hot and smoking and then cover them in buckets. Like people were ready. People were really supportive in lifting each other up. And, people helped me while I was choking and like blinded on the street and wasn't able to get home. As soon as they helped me, unfortunately, and I felt better, I was like trying to get back to my house and was hit again. And then, there was a neighbor who was like suffering like an asthma attack and I couldn't help her because I was like suffering myself and I was struggling to breathe and everything. Thankfully, someone else ran up and helped her get into her house. Like it was really just a mess, but it really actually renewed my faith in everyday people. So that was really beautiful. I felt like I was going to say something else, but
Well, sort of having off the track of the seriousness of this question. So most of us and most people, when they see themselves on video or on film, it's a little distracting for them and a little cringeworthy. So how about for you? Was this the first time hearing your voice come across, and how did you react?
Oh, yeah, I hate the whole thing. It's horrible. I feel like it'll just never get better. But yeah, it's cringeworthy and it's the worst. But, it was actually the first interview that I did with the Inquirer about what happened that made me realize like it's worth dealing with the cringeworthiness of being visible and also like the creepiness of also being visible. Because not everyone is able to speak, not everyone is willing to speak. And if you are willing to put yourself out there and you can like get over your ego about it, then you should, because we need more people telling their story, coming forward. And also people who are willing to commit the time, because it takes a lot of time and energy to constantly be putting yourself out there like that. So yeah, there's a lot of power in it, and there's a lot of importance in it, I think. So I'm trying to get over it every day.
Well, first of all, you should know the first comment that came up when everybody heard your voice was, "Oh, that's so sultry."
Oh, thank you.
We loved it.
Yeah. I love it.
But that, excuse me, that reminds me, Barbara, do you know who Barbara, oh my gosh, I just blanked her name, Barbara Giddings is?
No.
Barbara Giddings is kind of the mother, the Rosa Parks of the LGBT movement.
Oh.
She's the one you would recognize her face. She's seen in all the posters, who started the Independence Day protests that they used to do.
Yes. The
And
homophiles.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I had the pleasure of meeting her when she was elderly
Oh, cool.
and seeing her in interviews. And somebody asked her once, "Why do you put yourself out there?" This is back when she was one of the first people coming out publicly as lesbian. And she said, "Because I can. I have a family that supports me, and I have a job that won't fire me." And that's not the case for most people.
Right.
So it was kind of the same thing. And I always sort of took that for me coming out and
Right.
and being very visible in the community. It was because I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel I have to.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, we'll always try to continue to lift up other voices and continue to encourage people to speak where possible. But I think that it's hard to ask that of other people if you aren't willing to do it yourself. And I think that that's like an assumption that people make sometimes, that you're like trying to like fight your way to the, to the camera to talk about this really traumatic, horrible experience that you had. And that it's really not that way. It's hard getting folks to come forward, and because a lot of folks feel that there's not actually a benefit of doing that. Why bother? This is just a screwed up thing, and who cares? But I think it doesn't matter until we make it matter. And so if you have that in your heart and you feel like it's worth a shot at least to try to make it matter and try to see if that changes anything, then it's worthwhile. What else are we doing, other than living and trying to survive? So,
Well, lucky for us, you care.
right.
Speaking of the press, Susie shared the recent Philadelphia Inquirer article that came out this week. And I saw a picture of you, and I'm assuming some of the community members marching or walking down 52nd Street. What was that like for you? And was that another moment of your community coming together to commemorate what happened a year ago?
Yeah. For me, it was a really powerful moment because it was a real full circle moment. And I know for a lot of folks who were there on 52nd Street that day, like being in that procession and seeing the cops there was like very triggering for them. But it was really a moment that I was grateful that we did, because after we did that march, and first of all, I think it's just powerful to like make noise and to acknowledge, like if we didn't organize that, and it was many different organizations who came together, orgs that usually don't work together, were willing to come together in support of this moment, because, when we were on I-676 or 52nd Street, we weren't thinking about the tacky Facebook post or the quote-unquote bad politics that, not as good left politics that someone might have had when we were getting tear gassed by the police. We were thinking, I hope we survive this, And when we were doing something like organizing protests in front of the police departments and things like this, things that are like scared the crap out of me, at least, we weren't, at least I wasn't thinking about, petty stuff that happens in between like two individuals. It's like those moments when those moments were happening and we were like, we could feel that something violent was about to come. I just remember in those moments, like looking in the eyes of these people that I didn't know at the time, but then we ended up becoming very close in our organizing work and just being like, all right, like you're my people. This is it. This is all we have. And, at some moments just like grabbing the hand of whoever you're with and just like booking down the street, running from cops or whatever. So I think that those are kind of like trauma bonds, which we're learning now are not the best. But I think that they are really helpful for helping us as organizers and as community members cut through the bullcrap and come together when it matters. You know, we don't have to agree on everything, but our human rights, our basic rights, should be enough to bring us together, you know, and they are.
And who did you collaborate with for the film?
For the film, we really...
And just the making of.
Yeah, so the making of the film happened with a dear friend who I work a lot with through... Well, first of all, I met this person when I first studied abroad in India 12 years ago or so when I was at Temple. And also just down the street here. And met this person. I was very young, like 19, and
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, right. And they really like adopted me into their life. They are her name is Krishnapriya and her husband Narendran, and they are visual artists based out of Chennai, which is in southern India. And their house is really like a hub where all types of artists just come in and out. And I was so lucky that they tolerated me and loved me and stayed with me until I got my little act together, because it's, you know, it's not easy being like a Western person coming to India and like not being totally annoying. I get that now, having like done study abroad programs for so long. But yeah, so I've worked with Krishnapriya in that teaching artist residency at UPenn, and also got her to host Penn students to do an artist residency at her house in Chennai, which was a great experience for folks. And we've just been kind of expanding our working relationship more and more. This is our first creative project together. And we realized, like, this is cool. Like, we really liked working with each other. And it's not always easy. You guys could probably relate. It's not always easy to find easy, fruitful, fun, dynamic working and creative partnerships. And I think we like finally recognize that in each other, and we want to continue to make more films like this in the future.
And I guess we should say, for people who are listening just by audio, it's an animated film, which is kind of cool.
Yes. Stop motion animation, which Krishnapriya and I, but like her especially as a visual artist background, had never done stop motion or film before. So again, it was just one of those situations where like, you know, we're not trained in this, but we do what we want to do, and we're going to figure it out. It's a lot harder and more expensive than we thought, but you know, we got it together and we were able to make it work. So.
How did you decide on the style of the film? Because it has a very speaking word type of rhythm to it.
Yeah, the spoken word element was very like accidental. It was kind of like the cadence in which I was speaking it came out in that way. I think subconsciously all of those years of watching Def Poetry Jam just kind of like seeped in, and then it just came out unexpectedly. But yeah, I feel like it ended up working, especially once we included the music. So the music part was another amazing collaboration with Shane Frederick, who is a jazz artist based out of Philly in Community and everything. And I've known him for a long, long time. And amazing, talented guy. And we collaborated on like that, you know, creating an original soundtrack that, or musical score, we can say, for the piece. And it just like, it lit the whole thing on fire. Like, I'm so happy we did that. It was so extra, like to try to like think of doing that and to do it. But it's like, it worked. And I feel like the film wouldn't be the same without it.
Yeah, Shane is great. I interviewed him a long time ago.
Yeah.
We should maybe talk to him about doing an intro for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Have you thought about making this into a live action film?
Meaning like with actors or something?
Yeah, to tell the story, like go into it even more so, and learn about the community members.
Mm-hmm.
When I
That
was
would be
watching
interesting.
it, yeah, when I was watching it, I wanted to see more.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's cool. That's really cool. Definitely. Well, the thing that I loved about animation it was really hard. With other friends who are brilliant filmmakers, we wanted to try to make a documentary that didn't center the trauma of what happened, but kind of got really deep into the story of 52nd Street and why it became such a site of uprising and upheaval during this time. And it was really hard finding people who were willing to talk on camera. And again, because of like that lack of trust that exists, I think with the public, because it's like we knew a lot of the people, it's just they weren't willing to put themselves out there like that. And the thing about animation that I love is that it kind of like allows you to tell the story without having to put people out there, and it's like less vulnerable, but it's also like really creative. But that's cool. Were you talking about like in a documentary format or with actors?
I think either, but I think I was thinking about actors.
That would be cool. Someone should do that, and I would be happy to help if anyone, because that would be a real stretch for me.
So do you have any words of wisdom for filmmakers, or not filmmakers, but people who want to get into film and have no experience? I think it can be extremely daunting to want to explore film, but having no idea where to start. And you seem to have done it so effortlessly. From what I've seen, your documentary was amazing. Thanks. And so was your short. So do you have any words of wisdom?
Yes, I would say just do it. Like, don't, toy around with like low self-esteem about it or some crap like that, because anyone can do this work. And it's a very like available medium these days. And it's just like to start and also to really use the resources that are available. You don't have to do everything, and nor should you try, because that would be really difficult. But to really rely on the expertise. There's so many people who did go to school. Like, find those people and, work with them and collaborate. Because the synergy of, like, bringing all of these different people, everyone brings their own magic to the situation. That is actually the funnest part about making a film. And it's a joy. So, once you release that kind of internal monologue or expectation that you have to, it's like, oh, well, I don't have any editing experience or shooting experience, you don't need any of that. Your role could be something entirely different in the film. And without your role, the film wouldn't happen. So that's like really major. And then also just like paying attention early on. Like, if it's not the right fit for you, if it's not the right working relationship, don't be afraid to be like, you know what? This isn't working for me. I'm going to go in a different direction, because that also can really like stall projects or make them not happen. So those are all, like, to me, the core things of what I would recommend.
Yeah, and just to second that, there have been times when I actually spoke at Temple and to some of the students, and I kind of say the same thing: just go for it. And one of my the test subjects that I use is years ago when I was programming films for QFlix, which was actually at the time was the Philadelphia International Gay and Lesbian Film Festival. We had a film come in, and it was on a VH tape, which shows you how long ago this was. Mm-hmm. And the film was called Here Boy. And so I put the tape into the VHS machine. I pressed play. It had all these sort of opening credits. And then there was a woman on camera, and she just went, "Here, boy." And this dog jumped on her from the side and knocked her over. And that was it. The film ended, and the credits rolled. I was on the floor laughing. The way she did it was so unexpected, and yet it was so simple. Mm-hmm. And it made all the film festivals.
Right.
So you never know. The simplest idea, could get you traveling around the world. I had a 3.5-minute film that I went to South Korea and Barcelona with. Mm-hmm. So as
exactly.
You said, just get out there and do it, people.
Yeah. And I mean, with this film, we originally talked about doing stick figures that were moving, like something really basic, just like swirly lines that were moving on the page, and then my voiceover without any sound. And just so that the words could be, delivered out to the public. And you know, from there, it was like we all just felt really passionate. So being really passionate also really helps, like, about the subject. And that kind of forced us all to kind of like push the envelope further and further and do more than we had ever intended. Which, you know, just letting the film be great regardless of the budget, sometimes that gets you in trouble. But sometimes it's like the thing that actually ends up leading very organically to a cool piece of art that most importantly you can feel proud of, which then helps give you the juice to do all the other things that come after that period, which is the editing and the distribution and the screenings and this and that. So,
Well, they nailed the hair.
thank you. Yeah, I feel like that was sort of like a joke, an internal joke that they made it so hilariously three-dimensional, but
I loved it.
So what are the next steps for you and your projects? You know, what are you hoping for?
yeah, so I think this episode will be airing in the fall, I believe, right?
Probably.
We're not sure
yeah.
yet.
Okay, but at least like maybe August or something. But well, the short film got accepted into some festivals. I'm trying not to say exactly which ones because some of them say like don't say it past a certain point.
Gotcha.
But 2 so far, and we applied to many others. And it got an award for the Venice Shorts Festival, which is cool.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was cool. And so, yeah, what I want to do is continue to show the film and find creative ways of distributing it and getting it out there to the public. And I also want to develop a workshop around the film because I think that art, like as we did with Until and Unless, art is a great vehicle for having difficult conversations about complicated subjects. It allows a starting point for people to move into a more challenging conversation. And so I'd like to develop a workshop around the film and then bring that to institutions to help teach people how can you make Black Lives Matter in your own institution in a very hyper-local way. What can you actually do beyond just showing up to a protest and beyond just making a Facebook post? How can you organize yourself and your community and your institution to be more equitable and confront some of that institutionalized white supremacy? That's really at the work of what we wanted to do with Penn Community for Justice and this film. So doing that in a way, getting that message out there to outside of our little bubble is something that I'm interested in doing.
As the director of programming for the film festival, we would like to extend you the invitation to show your film at our festival.
Thank you. I would love it. I humbly accept.
And Diana had an idea as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Susie. We're putting together with Three Left-Handed Women Entertainment Company. The 3 of us are putting together compilations of shorts.
Cool.
And we're currently working on a social justice compilation. And we wanted to possibly add your short to
That's
our
awesome.
compilation if you were willing to
Yes.
allow us to do that.
I'll have my people call your people. We can work it out. No, just kidding. That would be amazing, of course.
Do we have a little sound effect so we can get some cheering?
Right.
I did want to
That's
ask,
awesome.
too, where can listeners watch the short and Until and Unless? Is there access to that?
Well, if you donate to Anandam's fundraiser right now, they are giving everyone who donates any amount access to the film. Otherwise, they are only screening it when they can host screenings and like have the community speak for themselves, kind of that thing we were talking about, which is more than accessible through Zoom. So if you're interested in that, we will include, I think, in the show notes, a link to how to get in touch with Anandam. And then for testimony, it's not been distributed yet, but if you're interested in doing it, hosting a screening or something like that, or want to be on a kind of mailing list for when it will be made available, then you can go to pennforjustice.com and send us an email saying that.
Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I have one last question. I
Okay.
don't know, Susie and Fong, do you have any other questions?
I do.
for-
I want to do some
Really?
rapid fire
Okay.
with Amelia.
Do you have a question? Do you have,
Not right now. Not
okay.
right now.
Well, I do have one more question before we go into rapid fire.
Okay.
And this is something we ask all our guests. Are you left-handed?
No, I'm definitely right-handed. Oh no.
I knew she was right-handed. She thinks differently than us.
Right. It's possible.
All right. So, well, listen, I have some rapid fire questions. So,
Okay.
are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm adjusting myself.
All right. So, my first kiss was with.
You can say pass.
That's right. Yeah.
With I don't want to say the person's name, but it was with my childhood best friend at the time, who was a woman, and I did not make the connection. I was like 13, 14, and I did not make the connection at the time that probably implied that I was a lesbian. I was in a lot of denial for many years after that.
See, mine was with Tommy Dorsey in 5th grade.
Oh, just putting Tommy on blast like that,
I
though.
am.
Okay.
Let's see. People often mistake me for.
Oh my God. Yes, the woman from Flowetry, all of the time. What is her name? Marsha Ambrosia. All of the time. There was one time she was performing at Odunde, and I was trying to I didn't even know she was performing. And I tried to walk through the crowd, and everyone was like, Marsha, Marsha. And I just started waving. I just couldn't help it. I was like taking all of that fame for myself.
Yeah, go for it. Ever play any sports?
Unfortunately, several, and that did not go well for me. Softball, soccer, one day of being a ballerina, mostly just to take the picture, one day of being in gymnastics, basketball. And I was like 3rd or 4th string for all of those. So,
I was going to say basketball.
yeah, believe it or not.
All right, that's almost as crazy as me playing softball.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I got cut from basketball just by 1 inch because I was 1 inch shorter than the other girl.
Lucky
in
you.
junior high.
Oh, that's
I was
crazy.
cut.
I think
Yeah.
we all wish that happened to us, so no worries.
What about you? You seem like a sporty
us less
person.
I
athletic
played a lot
people.
of sports, but none of them lasted for long. I did ballet, tennis, soccer, lacrosse, softball, dance, a lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Nice.
answer any of my other questions?
Do you want me to? Oh,
Sure.
My first kiss was in kindergarten on the slide with a boy named Chris Boylan, and I'm still good friends with him, and he's an actor in Philadelphia.
Nice.
Yeah,
Theater actor or
both.
film?
He does
Okay.
both. Yep.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I did play soccer.
It was a nice slide.
I played 2 years JV and 2 years varsity on the girls' soccer team in high school. What are you counting as like a first kiss? Like on the lips, or are you talking about like on the cheek?
I considered it full on makeout. That's how I answered mine.
Yeah, kind of.
Not to
Mine was not
overshare
makeout.
details.
I was in kindergarten.
Right. I was like, okay,
At least on the
fresh.
lips, I would say.
Oh God, I wish I could redo mine. Mine's an embarrassment because I was 15. I had braces on. It was kind of weird. It was in the parking lot of the mall, of our Park City Mall. It was with a guy who used to play football and volleyball in a neighboring high school that was in the wealthy suburbs, and I regret every minute of it. It was sloppy, Anyways, I wish I could redo.
Well, my first kiss was with Tommy Dorsey, but there were a lot of signs that I also might have been a lesbian from way back, including in kindergarten playing house with this little Russian girl, because I always had a thing for foreign women, and saying like, I'll be the mommy, you be the other mommy. And she was like, don't we need a daddy? I was like, nah, we're good. And then apparently in 2nd grade, I tried to buy my teacher a negligee for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
I
Nice.
was like, she looks so nice in it. So yeah, a little Mac Daddy
Right.
before I even knew it. Are you allergic to anything?
No.
Anybody?
No,
I'm
none.
allergic to pollen and cat dander. Actually, cat dander is pretty bad for me. If I don't take an allergy pill, I break out in hives. I start coughing like I have asthma,
Ooh,
and my
that's
eyes
bad.
start tearing up. It sucks. I really like cats too, but
But you do have a pet now, though.
I have a chinchilla that I'm not allergic to, and I love her to death. She has the most cutest personality.
I'm going to
ever.
name drop. Marnie is her name.
Okay, Marnie.
Best investment of love I've ever made.
Oh.
So
And people often mistake me for?
I don't think
Back
anyone.
in the day, I used to get Jennifer Beals a lot when Flashdance was out.
Interesting. I can see that.
People have said, well, no longer Ellen Page, but people had said back when Juno came out that I looked a little
Yes.
like Ellen Page.
I knew you reminded me of someone. And I was saying also the Smallville woman who
Oh,
ended
yeah.
up joining the Nexus cult thing.
Yeah.
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 A little bit like her. Like maybe if Juno and that character, just speaking of their character strictly, would combine into one person, it'd be you.
wow, that's amazing.
I think most of us travel a lot. Have you ever been lost?
Lost? Oh, yeah, definitely.
Or I should
Not
say,
lots
do you
of
have
times.
your favorite lost travel story?
Usually, I didn't enjoy being lost. But yeah, there's too many times to count because I tend to like to wander. I tend to like to walk and feel free. And then I get a little too free, and then I'm in a foreign country, but there's no GPS, and I'm just like not speaking any local languages, and I'm just kind of screwed. And then I just keep walking until something looks familiar. That's usually how I find my way out of it.
Kind of like in Philly.
Yes, exactly, all the time.
I got lost in Greece on a scooter with my girlfriend, and we were actually trying to get to the cliff where Sappho had killed herself, committed suicide. And we got there, and it was beautiful. And then on the way back, we got lost, and we were running out of fuel for the scooter, and we were in the middle of this crazy forest where we were seeing signage everywhere, like on trees and stuff, that looked like it was from, what's the movie where the woman's, like the camera's really close on the woman?
Blair Witch Project.
Blair Witch Project, yeah. So they're like symbols like that. We were so freaked out trying to find our way back. She taught me a lot of curses in Greek at that time, but we did eventually find our
You
way
made it
back
home
to
without
a little
running out of
seaside
gas.
by the skin of
Good.
our teeth. All right, let's see. Let's find another little question here. Mother's name.
Kathy?
Mine's Tony. My mother's name is. She goes by Tony.
I'm like, isn't that a security question? Why are we
Oh, that's
giving
true. All
people
right,
our
never mind.
What could possibly kill us? What are you fishing for? What's your password just for the hell of it?
All right. I will switch that then. What's the first R-rated film you ever saw, or the first queer film you ever saw?
That one takes some work to think about. I used to really be into Halloween and like the murder-based kind of films as a very small child, inappropriately, and Oz, and that was very queer, actually, depicting male sex. Really, I mean, some and also male sexual violence, like male on male, for really the first time in such a massively distributed way, in a way that was not pitched as being LGBT. And I was way too young to be watching
how old
that.
were you?
I was like in the third grade. It was so inappropriate, but it was so good. And I would say that definitely shaped my, some of my taste and, maturity levels.
I think my first was probably Dirty Dancing. I think I saw that when I was about 5. I don't know if that's R-rated, but I felt R-rated when I was 5.
Yeah. I saw Blazing Saddles with my brother, and he literally was rolling in the aisles, as in like through the chewing gum and the popcorn on the floor was like rolling in the aisles. And then I think the first queer film was the lesbian film Desert Hearts. And I went to, there's a very steamy sex scene in there. And my friend who went with me throughout that whole scene had her napkin for the popcorn and was just tearing it into pieces and going like, oh, no, they're not going to. Oh, no, they're not. Oh, no, they're not. Oh, yes, they are. Yes, they are. She was like tearing her popcorn napkin apart. So the
That's
floor
so
was littered
cute.
with paper at the end of it.
Did she come out as gay? eventually?
My friend or the?
Yeah.
Oh, she already was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
First R-rated movie. I don't quite remember, but the one I do remember seeing that I really liked was Pulp Fiction, and I just like the music and the style of it. First queer film. Again, that I don't remember. I think I would say Saving Face by Alice Wu. I actually watched it at the Philadelphia Q Film Festival when they had it in college. And I went by myself. I wanted to see the film so badly because it had Asian American actors in it. And I was like, wow, that's really neat and cool. So so there's this thing about queer film, right, where people don't end up together. But in that, well, actually, I can't even. Oh my God, I would ruin the ending if I said anything. let me zip my mouth there. But it's a really nice film. I like it a lot. I think the story is very relatable.
All right, so since we're all film people, let's wrap it up with maybe a favorite movie scene or favorite movie line or quote.
I need time to think about that.
Putting us on the spot.
Right.
I know, I should have given these earlier. Well, I'll start with mine. So my favorite line, and I can't give you the reasoning around it, but it's nobody's perfect, and it's at the very end of Some Like It Hot, which also has a lot of sort of gay overtones. And I recommend everybody watch that film. It's hilarious, it's fun, it's heartwarming. You definitely want to catch it. And also Willy Wonka at the very end when he says, "And so shines a good deed in a weary world."
That is a beautiful moment. Mm-hmm. It is. I feel like I'm not as much of a film buff as you guys. Maybe I used to be a little bit more, but now not as much. So can I answer with a TV show?
Yes, you can.
My favorite TV show is Living Single. And
we are living
single. That was the Empire.
You skipped ahead of me.
And my favorite line is "Woo Woo Woo" by Sinclair. Mm-hmm. I just love it.
I have about 10 episodes on my DVR right now.
Yeah, classic and holds up. Okay, and talk about lesbian.
Woo woo woo.
So I'm a accidental Star Wars geek, and I would say when Yoda says, "Do or do not, there is no try." That's my favorite one because you either do it or you don't do it. It kind of reminds me of like you either do it and don't complain, or either do it, or if you don't do it, don't complain about it if it doesn't get done.
Right,
so,
I like that.
And to not make excuses for yourself about your own actions.
Mm-hmm.
Diana's trying to cheat over there.
I was looking up. I was going to do a current TV show that I absolutely love, and I think Fong does too. The Handmaid's Tale. Yes. And I was looking up the Latin phrasing, but I'm not going to say it. But I like when the June, the main character, says, "Don't let the bastards grind you down."
Oh yeah.
I like that a lot. And I also, whenever I'm feeling down and I need to have a pick me up, I love Best in Show, which I also love dogs. So
Classic.
yeah.
Cool.
Oh, and I do love Drop Dead Gorgeous. That was amazing for me. That had a lot of good one-liners as well. But I love that. Reminded me, mockumentaries are like my favorite genre, actually, and that one was just classic.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Amelia, for coming by and sharing your story with us and sharing your films.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yes,
and I love
thank
being in
you.
this super
Great.
fancy studio.
Yes. Well, we are three left-handed women. I'm Susie.
I'm Diana.
And I'm Fong.
And thank you for joining us.